Today we have Niki Gratrix, and she's going to be talking about emotional trauma and how that dramatically impacts our health and tips on releasing emotional trauma. She has so many good tips and some that may surprise you. This is a very, very compelling interview that I'm so excited to share with you. So we're going to be talking today about emotional trauma and how that affects your energy levels and your stress levels, and give the listeners some tips about using bioenergetics to address emotional trauma in such a profound way. I mean, for me, using bioenergetics has helped me improve my emotional life and release trauma in ways I didn't really expect. And as a result, today I'm so much happier and just so much clearer and more focused, and just have more energy and just generally a happier person. So let's talk about, how important is stress and emotional trauma in maintaining abundant energy?
So it's such an important aspect. Emotional trauma, I believe, especially emotional trauma from childhood, is probably the most underexposed risk factor for probably all chronic complex illness today. And the poster child sort of adult illnesses related to emotional trauma are fatigue-related illnesses. Everybody's affected by adversity in childhood. That sets us up for how we're going to respond to the inevitable stresses in adulthood as well. So in childhood, if we have adversity, it affects our resilience to trauma for the rest of our lives. So it goes on and on. It's everything. It's mental health. It's illnesses that are female dominant illnesses. It's cancer. It's heart disease. It's everything. So the bottom line is just saying, there is an emotional component to every ailment and illness. And so, all of us practitioners need to be addressing that. And anybody who has, who wants either to be supercharged, or especially if you have fatigue, you have this six-fold increased risk of developing fatigue in adulthood with emotional trauma in childhood. So it's the most underexposed risk factor. I'd say it's probably more important than toxins. Yeah. They usually go together.
Yeah, so let's talk about those mechanisms. How does trauma and stress affect our biology?
It's about the stress response. It's this fight-flight response that we have to stresses in the environment. And what happens when we have either a one-off shock or we have this intermittent but chronic stress, like being around an unpredictable parent constantly, what happens is that they're actually calling it kindles the brain, which means it triggers the brain to get stuck in a chronic stress response, even if the external stress is taken away. So we have a reduced threshold of what triggers a stress response in us in response to a stress, and the whole system's reset. So we are more responsive to stress, and we have a higher stress response for longer since the day the trauma happened. In essence, when this system reset happens, you are less in the state of the parasympathetic rest, digest, detoxify. You're in the stress, fight, flight response. So all of that rest, digest, detoxify aspect gets downregulated. So you've got worse sleep, you're not detoxifying, and you're not digesting properly. And that's the foundation of illness, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about the steps to addressing emotional trauma. Where do people start? I mean, I've had about probably 10 years over the course of my life of talk therapy. Not because I'm crazy, but because I really love self-help stuff, like a lot of women do, a lot of the female listeners. I love the feeling like I'm taking care of myself emotionally. And one of the ways I did that was starting as a teen, going to therapy and talking it out. But the problem with that, I think that a lot of what drives us emotionally, we're not consciously aware of. And that is kind of part of the problem with talk therapy and it's great. I mean, a lot of people need that. They need that connection, especially a lot of people that are socially isolated today, and people do sort out their problems that way. But I think that for me, I'd kind of been there, done that, and I still felt I had all this emotional baggage that I wasn't able to address because it was unconscious. And that's where, for me, bioenergetics came in, identifying and addressing those unconscious traumas that are drivers of behavior.
Yeah, you've made a really good point. So, it's very interesting when we look at what is an emotion? And when we, is an emotion, is it purely, our emotions driven purely by neurotransmitters? Are emotions just expressions of like hormonal balance in our body? So are sort of emotions just biochemical? And we've got all this research coming through now about the gut and how that affects how we feel, right? So when we have dysbiosis, we have this increased risk of anxiety and depression, and they're even looking at probiotics to help people with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So we know that this, emotions have this physical component, but emotions are also energy. And, that's why one of the most interesting areas, like you, I'm a big fan of bioenergetics, because I can address the emotional and the physical health by using bioenergetics. What's bioenergetics? The study of energy in living systems. So, it's fascinating when you consider emotion as a kind of, it's a thing, it's electromagnetic, it has charge, as well as having this kind of physical component. So I often say emotions aren't just biochemical, they're also electromagnetic. And I think that's where there are some amazing things, other proof that, emotions are sort of energetic as well. So you look at some of the most successful interventions for trauma, they're on the energy side, so energy psychology, things like neurofeedback, which is changing brain waves in response to feedback, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, there's no talking involved with that, that's changing waves again. EFT, emotional freedom technique, that's actually tapping on the ends of acupuncture points on the face. So what we see is some of the most effective treatments are working at the energetic level. And what's the most interesting, especially when we start to talk about like working with things like NES, infoceuticals, you can work energetically with people, purely energetically, where you don't sort of do any talk therapy or even start kind of you let go of the story. And with using energy, you can just create an emotional release. You can move stuck emotions by just pure energetic work, because emotions are frequency. So you could use sound therapy, you can use light therapy, and you can use, electromagnetic and even currents, like electromagnetic currents will work. When we're stuck with frozen trauma, that is just the body's gone stiff and it's holding itself, and there's trapped emotional stuff, and the nervous system is stuck in this fight-flight response, that takes tremendous energy away from life and living. So emotions have charge, they have frequency. So, and that's one of the reasons why, for example, I mentioned you could use sound, you could use light, you can use magnetics, you can also use frequency imprinted on water, which is what we use in NES when we have, like I'm just holding up here, like this is an infoceutical. So we know that it's possible, if we know emotions have frequency, we can find out what frequency they are and we can imprint it on water. So 30 years of heart math have shown that, for example, they can look at a heart rate variability result for you, and they have a 75% chance that they'll be able to tell you what emotional state you're in just by looking at your heart rate variability, for example. And the beauty is, this is a gentle way, when you work with pure energy, of releasing energy without re-traumatizing the person. It's just a release of feeling. It's a very interesting way to work, and it's a very gentle, non-traumatizing way to support people when you purely work on sort of the frequency level, and you're actually bypassing the mind. People should know you can also work purely energetically, and just you can be releasing, out of the body and sort of having an emotional detox. I call it the emotional detox. So I love bioenergetics for that reason. It's why I work with NES and why I use the infoceuticals.
Why don't you tell people a little bit about what is NES Health? And how does a NES Health scan, like you do a little scan, you kind of get at home, you would, order one of these little scanners, you do a scan, and you see a lot of information in your scan, which you then review with a practitioner. Tell us a little bit about what you see in regards to our emotions in that scan.
So there's a tremendous amount that you can see going on emotionally in an energy scan. So because both emotions and the physical body are energy, everything's energy. You'll be able to see all the energetic aspects of organs and systems and so on in the scan, but there's also the mind screens. So the mind screens in the NEST scan will literally pick up trauma that has registered on the brain and is connected to different parts of the body. So which is the brain hologram screen. For people may not know, but that's actually based on the work of German New Medicine and Dr. Hamer's work, where he was originally a doctor who his son was actually murdered, and within a few weeks he developed cancer, and he realized that the trauma of what had happened with his son was directly correlated with his cancer. And then he did huge amounts of research correlating what he could see were different parts of the brain being impacted by trauma on the energetic level, which would then correlate to different parts of the body. And he did thousands of scans, and Peter Fraser, who created the NEST system, actually incorporated all of that work into the scan. So, it's kind of reiterating what I mentioned, that, trauma is energetic as well as having a physical aspect. So what's brilliant about the scan is we can, it's possible to read the frequency and be able to detect and pick that up. So it's definitely going to pick up things that you as a client may not have been aware of. What's amazing with clients and with NEST is you'll see someone, for example, will talk about recovering from their IBS, but they'll talk about how they felt different as a person. And that's the key thing. I know when somebody's gone through real healing, when they're actually saying, I don't feel like the same person I was before. They're talking about their feelings. I don't feel as wound up. I don't feel as angry. I feel calmer. I feel more confident. And they'll always be saying that. And then they'll talk about their physical symptoms disappearing as well.
And I think another really important point of our talk is you want to clear negative emotions and traumas because they can cause physical health issues and they can promote physical health issues. And for a lot of people don't understand that when you're going to a medical doctor or even a functional medicine practitioner, they're working biochemically. Doctors are working with drugs and surgery. The functional medicine practitioners it's an upgrade, but working with supplements, still trying to elicit a biochemical response, physical change in the body. And the kind of missing the point or missing a large aspect of how our body works is we have an energetic field that we need to address energetically, and you can't get that with a conventional medical or functional practitioner. And if you don't address emotional traumas, it can affect your physical health. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean that's the huge point, and you can go so far. You can go to some degree, like we mentioned. If somebody does have dysbiosis, you could play around with neurotransmitters and balance neurotransmitters. You could work on a metabolic level, and for some that will balance their emotional state, and that's what they need to do. For many people, it doesn't go far enough, and especially when you get this nervous system reset. So remember when I mentioned, trapped emotions is a blockage and a disturbance and a distortion to the energy field, and the energetic aspects of the body is what is the blueprint for the physical body. So what's happening in the field is telling the biology what to do. So if that's got distorted information, this is this idea where if you've got distorted information in your energy field, you will constantly, for example, you might need to keep taking tons of vitamins and minerals because you're not actually absorbing and utilizing them properly, because there's a distortion, say, in the stomach field that's happening at the energetic level. And one of the places where shame and guilt gets stored in truckloads is in the stomach and in the digestive area. So it's a distortion in the energy field, and the energy field is telling the biology what to do. It's the blueprint. Genes aren't the only information that tells proteins how to specialize and how to become liver cells and kidney cells and how to repair. There's this strong electromagnetic field around that is telling the proteins how to differentiate and regenerate. So when we have a distortion in the energy field, one of the biggest distortions in the field are chronic, stuck, negative emotions and low emotions. It's vital to clear the energetic level to allow the biology to repair itself, because it's like that's the information that, the building block might be nutrition, good diet, the supplements. That's the raw materials to rebuild, but you need the information for the raw materials to tell them how to do that. And you need to go and become a liver cell, you need to be a skin cell, you need to go and rebuild and repair the digestion. It's kind of the foreman. And if the foreman will get if the foreman's got distorted information, that is going to, nothing you will do on the biochemistry will work as effectively.
I had reached a point in my life where I was eating a spectacular diet. I was taking the highest quality supplements. I had been detoxing for 5 years. I was exercising, meditating. I was doing all these things to take care of myself. And I still just didn't feel like I was operating at the level in my health and emotional life that I should have been. And I was kind of concerned that I had all this emotional stuff going on that I didn't really know how to address. And Nest Health gave me that answer. And it kind of came at a time that I needed it the most. Like, when you ask the question, the answers will come. And so I'm really, really thankful to Nest Health and the CEO, Harry Massey of Nest Health, for, providing this just incredible tool to help people. Because I know a lot of people listening feel like they're doing so much for their health and they just feel like they want to go to that next level. And I really think that Nest Health provides, that answer.
Yeah, it's superb. And one of the other brilliant things about the system specifically is that you can work remotely as well. And a lot of the systems that, especially energy testing systems and so on, like kinesiology and so on, some of the most advanced forms of that you need to be in person with people, and often you need two practitioners. So it's very intense work. And I could have sort of, I did all of Klinghart's training. Actually, I still think he's superb, but I didn't take on his system. I wanted to do Nest because that allowed me to be able to have clients all over the world and to be able to get this energetic scanning and the treatments out there no matter where people are. And a lot of my clients are fatigued, so they can't get out of the house, some of them. So all they need, we post everything to them. As long as they can get online and are fairly okay on a computer, they've got access to superb healing technology. So yeah, I love the system and it's great.
Yeah, and I love that it's designed like that to help people in their own home. There's access to quality healthcare for anyone in the world using Nest.
Yes. Yes.
So do you have any final tips to offer the listeners in regards to emotional trauma and addressing that?
I would only say that trust that the body knows how to heal itself, and quite often all we need to do is set up the right support network, give the right information to the body, have the building blocks like good nutrition available. The body will do the rest. So we need to do our part. The body's still a mystery ultimately, and science doesn't really understand. We haven't even talked about the aspects of quantum physics here, and there's huge implications of all that too. But the beauty is we don't need to understand it for the healing to take place, and that the body does know. When we break a leg, we go to hospital, all the doctors do is set it. They just stick the bones together. They don't do anything to make the bones heal. The body does that, right? So what we're doing is we're creating an optimum environment. We're providing the nutrients, we're providing the information necessary that's us doing our part. So it's a co-creative process with the body. And when I send the right, our own engagement as just in our own psychology as well, the individuals are great tools. But ultimately the engagement of you as the person, setting a clear intention for what you want as your outcome, fully engaging with that in an optimistic, committed attitude and a belief that it will work is tremendous, probably 50% of the story, right? So that's the other thing I would say, that the trust is needed, and that commitment and the knowingness that it's possible, that recovery is possible, that supercharged energy is possible.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because when you go to a conventional doctor or psychiatrist, you're really only going to be offered medications for any kind of emotional issues you're going through, depression or anxiety. And for me, I've been on antidepressants before, and they're a Band-Aid. They're really just covering up symptoms and not addressing the underlying root cause. And for me, I'm done with Band-Aids. I want to address the underlying root cause to get rid of the depression, get rid of anxiety or any kind of other negative thoughts or ruminating thoughts or, physical reactions in my body because of these emotional trauma issues, and just to release them and let go of them so they're no longer an issue. And I think so many people get stuck in that cycle. They're just not aware that there are so many unbelievable cutting edge modalities out there that really are light years ahead of what the medical mainstream community are doing.